Hezbollah is weighing its options after 2 days of remote attacks targeted its members and civilians. Israel hasn't commented on the explosions but says it's opening a new phase in its war on Gaza. But can it fight on two fronts? And is there any hope of a diplomatic solution? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Elizabeth Puranam. The people of Lebanon are on edge. 2 days of attacks targeting communication devices have rattled the country. Thousands of people have been injured and 37 killed, including children. Hezbollah, whose members were targeted, says it's the worst security breach since the war on Gaza began. It's blaming Israel and has threatened to retaliate. The Lebanese Aviation Authority has now banned pagers and walkie-talkies from all aircraft. With Israel moving soldiers north towards the border with Lebanon, what's next in this escalating conflict? And are the remote device attacks a violation of international law? We'll put that to our guests shortly, but first, this report from Imogen Kimber.
A second wave of explosions hits Lebanon. The first was pagers. This time, all kinds of communication equipment, from walkie-talkies to radios and batteries, were turned into bombs. One of the blasts struck a funeral, as people were burying the dead from the previous attack. Hundreds were injured, on top of the thousands injured on Tuesday, and several more were killed. Already overwhelmed hospitals were pushed to their limit, and an already fraught population left more on edge.
We treated one patient after another. We were working non-stop. I took my first break after 5 a.m. here in the office, and now I came back in the morning. The fear is for what's coming. What's coming is big.
This week's attacks have been condemned by international rights groups, including the UN, with calls for an investigation and accountability.
Simultaneous targeting of thousands of individuals without knowledge as to who was in possession of the targeted devices, their location and their surroundings at the time of the attack violates international human rights law and, to the extent applicable, international humanitarian law.
Hezbollah, whose members were targeted in the attacks, has blamed Israel. But the Israeli government has so far remained silent. However, its defence minister says there is a new phase of the war on Gaza, and Israeli troops are being sent to the northern border with Lebanon.
The centre of gravity is moving north, meaning that we are moving resources and forces and energy in the northern direction. We haven't forgotten the hostages and we haven't forgotten our goals in the south. This action is being done by all the bodies and the goal is a clear one. It's simple, to return the residents of the communities in the north to their homes safely.
Comments that are only intensifying fears of a wider conflict. While cross-border fire continues, with Hezbollah striking at least 4 locations in northern Israel. And Lebanon's caretaker Prime Minister and the National Disaster and Crisis Committee have begun stockpiling food, preparing shelters and readying hospitals for what might come. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guests in Beirut, Najat Aoun Saliba, a member of the Lebanese Parliament. In Durham, UK, Robert Geist Pinfold, a lecturer on peace and security at Durham University and an expert on strategy and territorial conflict. And also in Beirut, Jamal Ghosn, columnist at Akhbar newspaper. A very warm welcome to all of you. Jamal, I'll start with you. When we recorded this show a day ago, we thought we had a good idea of how the pagers exploded. Since then, we have walkie-talkies, phones, laptops, solar panels blowing up. Are people in Lebanon, is Hezbollah, is the Lebanese Parliament any the wiser on how this could have happened?
Well, I mean, we do have some more information than when it initially happened. Of course, there is some mystery to how it was carried out on such a wide scale and throughout all these different machines. But all indicators point toward tampering with the battery and lacing it with some type of high explosive. I've seen the explosive PETN mentioned in many reports, but we cannot know for sure. But this is the most likely scenario, that the batteries of the pagers and the other devices were somehow tampered with and laced with these explosives.
Robert, do you think that Israel could have tampered with so many different devices? We think that the pagers and the walkie-talkies were bought around the same time, around 5 months ago. But what about the rest of the devices?
Well, there's been some there's been more, I guess, information here on this topic that actually Israel didn't necessarily tamper with them. In many cases, they might have even built them. An examination of some of the devices has suggested that they're lacking some distinctive serial numbers, for example, and identification that would suggest they are coming from the company where they claimed to originate in. It's looking more and more like this was an Israeli shell company or a ghost company operating in Hungary, but also possibly in Bulgaria, using other international brands as a kind of smokescreen to make it look like it was a legitimate company, when of course it wasn't. And this seems to have been going on for some time. So most of those pages, we know, were ordered probably in 2024, probably after Hassan Nasrallah suggested that anyone involved in Hezbollah should stop using their mobile phones and kind of switch over to pages. But there is a suggestion, I've been seeing reports now, that actually Israel's been selling these devices from as early as 2021 and 2022. So it's been they've been slowly appearing in Lebanon, primarily in the hands of Hezbollah members and operatives. And obviously for Israel, this is a big coup. It's the sort of thing that excites people because it looks like the sort of plots you would see in a kind of airport thriller novel, some sort of spy movie. But at the end of the day, the results here are very much in question. How this will play out, whether it will end up bringing Hezbollah and Israel to war, is very much an open question.
Yeah, absolutely. Najat, Robert is talking about how, this has excited some people in Israel, but it has killed and injured. It's injured many civilians, killed civilians, including children, which is why we've heard various UN officials say that this is a violation of international law. Others have said that it's pure terrorism. It is a terrorist attack because of its indiscriminate nature and the fear that it's sown in people in Lebanon. Najat, how would you categorize this attack, and how should the Lebanese parliament and government respond to it?
Thank you for this question. Definitely, this is a terrorist attack that has been done or was done by Israel. And I think it has two levels. Definitely, the first level is that the Lebanese people have endured the consequences of this attack. But the second level is a global level. We really need to look at this type of weaponry and regulate them or discriminate them altogether, because this is not only attack on the Lebanese people. This is it's an attack on the humanity at large, because once the commodities that we use on daily basis become weaponries, I think we become all vulnerable to these types of attacks and cyber attacks. So I think we thank the UN Security Council for acting right away on condemning this terrorist attack, and we call on the international community to continue looking and calling this as a criminal attack, and also trying to put international treaties or some type of international collaboration to regulate or ban those types of attacks altogether.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to see what this unprecedented attack, what kind of restrictions or new precedents it leads to, both in how attacks are carried out and the efforts to stop them. Jamal, a former Mossad chief, said the exploding devices were meant to cause panic, stress and shock and demonstrate Israel's ability to breach Hezbollah's secure lines of communication. What impact will this have on the group?
Well, they definitely caused shock and terror, but let's also keep in mind that the thousands of simultaneous explosions that took place were not targeted at individuals. Some people carrying these devices were driving cars. Yesterday, there were a couple of walkie-talkies go off in ambulances. We have, as we saw from the footage that was shared, they went off in grocery stores. So, around a lot of civilian people. So this attack was meant to terrorize. It certainly did terrorize the population, but as far as its military impact, it's much less so, because it's not as effective, because we know for a fact that the military command and control of Hezbollah is still intact. We've seen operations go on today, and very precise hits against military targets, Israeli military targets. And we know they use other communication devices that are much more secure than the pagers. And these were just kind of used for broadcast messages and not specific military instructions. So the military effectiveness of this attack is very much in question.
Robert, do you agree with that about the military effectiveness of this attack, and why do you think Israel carried out this attack now?
No, I don't. Whether you think the attack is legitimate or illegitimate, I think this is an operational success for Israel. Whether it's a strategic or a political success is another story. But we know this was targeted primarily against Hezbollah members and fighters. Yes, not people up in the higher chain of command, but ordinary members of the organization, many of whom lost limbs, lost eyesight. They are therefore rendered combat ineffective in the event of a future conflict with Israel.
But we just have to remember that it's not that it wasn't just Hezbollah combatants that had the devices, right?
Right, obviously some of those devices find their way into the hands of other people who are not the intended targets, but the vast majority of targets, from what we're hearing, were affiliated with Hezbollah in some way, shape or form, either in the military or in a civilian role. And I think it's important to note that most of the political leaders weren't actually targeted in these attacks, with some exceptions like the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon, for example. But it also has a psychological impact as well. As a soldier, whether you're a paramilitary or a military organization, it doesn't matter. You want the equipment you've been given by your commanders to work. You want it to save your life, and you want it to be able to do what you want it to do. And this is a case of that only not happening, but also actually endangering the lives of the people who got hold of this equipment, and they will have got hold of it as a result of orders from the chain of command in Hezbollah. Why Israel did this? Well, I think Israel's goals here have been consistent. They basically want to get Hezbollah to remove itself south of the Litani River, so in southern Lebanon and off the border with northern Israel. They've traditionally seen there's two ways to do this. One is to use military force, i.e. to start a war, and the other one is through negotiations, through diplomacy. Israel initially said they favoured a diplomatic approach, but as time has gone forward, you've seen Israel escalate more and more and more with military means. Now, traditionally, they've been very, very bad at using military means to secure this area. Since the 1970s, Israel has faced this problem of groups south of the Litani River threatening Israel's territorial integrity. So they're very, very bad in terms of doing this historically, but they're trying to do so again. And I think there's a change in Israel's calculus. They now perceive that actually, even if they might not want war, Hezbollah wants war even less than them, so they can keep upping the ante and pressuring Hezbollah, and maybe try and force it to unilaterally withdraw to the Litani River. I very much doubt this is going to happen. There's no evidence for this whatsoever, but this is a tactic that's being taken seriously within Israel and advocated on talk shows all throughout the day. So it shows you where Israel's strategic thinking is. Whether it's effective or not is very much another story.
And Najat, what is the Lebanese Parliament's thinking on what Israel is doing on its northern border? We've heard from these attacks took place at the same time that we've heard that the Israeli military is moving its 98th division that includes thousands of troops, paratrooper infantry units, elite commando forces. They are moving them to the northern border. Does the Lebanese Parliament believe that Israel is preparing for war with Hezbollah?
We believe that Lebanon has been in a state of war since October 8, a year ago. So now maybe the war will be escalating, but the southern Lebanon has been really in a state of war for over a year. We call on all parties, all the members of the parliament to rally around the state and to go to the parliament and fill in the void that we've had for 2 years now and elect a president. Because without having a president, we will not have a sovereign state that will be negotiating whether war or peace. We cannot live under the mercy of a militia that does not represent the opinion of all members of the parliament and let alone all people in Lebanon. We, as Change MPs, took upon ourselves to call for the reinstating the state, for reinstating the rule of law. And we want all the parliaments today, before tomorrow, to honor the constitution and go to the parliament and elect a president. Because by electing a president, we reinstate the institutions. We would have an active cabinet who will be able to negotiate and to address our concerns to the UN Security Council and to all the international community.
Jamal, what do you make of what you've heard so far, that Lebanon, it needs to get its government in order, it needs to elect a president so that it's not Hezbollah essentially representing a nation and possibly taking it to war with Israel?
Well, first of all, the war is the making of Israel since it's been occupying Lebanese territory forever, and there's still under international law, there's still a dispute over a territorial dispute. So the issue is not whether or not the resistance of Lebanon is taking Lebanon to war. If anything, they are the only thing keeping Israel from committing what they're committing in Gaza here. The deterrence that they present is not definitely the Lebanese government that's deterring attacks that would be on the scale of what's going on in Gaza. It's actually the military prowess of Hezbollah and the resistance movement. So this is what's keeping Lebanon from turning into Gaza. It's definitely not the UN Security Council, and definitely not an elected figurehead president that would not have real power. So yes, Lebanon has issues in its institutions, starting with parliament that does not do its job, but that's not the issue right now. Right now, we're talking about an Israeli crime that needs to be addressed, and the whole population needs to come together and address that issue, and rather than living on another planet and thinking of magical solutions that are going to come from the UN. As we've seen, the ICC has failed to protect Gaza, so I don't know how a Lebanese president could do much.
Robert, we're hearing from Jamal there saying that for now it is Hezbollah who acts as a deterrent to stop Israel from doing what it's done in Gaza, in Lebanon. You were saying earlier that Israel has made a calculation that it doesn't want to go to war, but that Hezbollah has even less of an appetite to go to war. But despite that, there are many people who think that this Israeli Prime Minister does want to go to war. And a recent poll by the Israeli think tank, the Democracy Institute, showed that 67% of Jewish responders thought that Israel should actually intensify its response to Hezbollah. So whatever Israel's initial intention before unleashing these attacks, do you think that the government will face domestic pressure to capitalize on the momentum that it has right now by carrying out such an attack on Hezbollah?
Yes, I think this will chime very well with Israel's domestic opinion and public opinion in Israel. Let's not forget that there are 60,000 displaced Israelis from northern Israel who are living in temporary accommodation and shelters, just as there are many thousands of displaced Lebanese in southern Lebanon. There is intense and increasing public pressure on Israel's government to do something about this. Israel has done something it's very rarely done in its history. It's basically created a de facto buffer zone, or dare I say it, a security zone inside its own borders by evacuating such a vast amount of territory within its own largely internationally recognized borders. This is quite unprecedented, and it's putting a lot of strain on Israel's government and the kind of perception that they must act, they must do something against Hezbollah and this war of attrition. Israel does not like wars of attrition. It feels like it does very poorly. It hurts its economy. Its track record is not very good. Israel wants a rapid and decisive outcome, which is why it keeps escalating in terms of these strikes to try and get out of this cycle of daily tit-for-tat attacks between both sides. Now, the key issue here is that I think, yes, this is an operational victory. And actually, it's quite sort of impressive if you look at it from an intelligence studies perspective. But the key question here, has Israel actually provoked Hezbollah into starting a war now? There will be so much, if there's pressure from non-Hezbollah affiliated Lebanese not to endanger Lebanon's future as a result of a reckless war between two actors, Israel and Hezbollah, there's also significant pressure building internally in Hezbollah to act against Israel following these attacks, because think of the number of people that have been killed, the number of people that have been wounded, the psychological damage there. So Israel is really playing with fire in this game of brinkmanship. It's something that looks to other observers impressive at the moment operationally, but the jury is still very much out to see whether in the long run this is a good move or not.
Yeah, Jamal, I want to come to you in just a moment with the point that Robert is making about internal divisions within Hezbollah itself. But Najat, how much has this ongoing tensions between Hezbollah and Israel sown divisions in Lebanese society itself? And you touched on this earlier about the Lebanese Parliament needing to come together. But just how difficult a position does this put the Lebanese government in when Israel says that its war is with Hezbollah, and yet at least more than 100 civilians have been killed in Lebanon since the war in Gaza began?
Exactly. So Lebanon is already on its knees with the economic collapse and with the Beirut blast that we experienced in 2020. So we don't need more destruction. And if we do need to protect ourselves from the enemy, we need to be all together in solidarity with the sovereign state in order for us to protect ourselves from all the
And Najat, when you say we need to be all together, sorry to interrupt. I just want to be
one thing that is extremely important here. The Lebanese army forces have been really up to the standard and up to the expectations every time they have been assigned any responsibility. We need one Lebanese army forces, one forces that protects our borders, one force that will be also equally protecting all the Lebanese people. This is extremely important. And one more thing, we cannot continue looking and fixing crises one after the other. We have been living in this type of war for over 50 years. I think it's time to start building a state. And without building a state, I think we will be putting off crisis after crisis after crisis. Nothing will build a state except the reinstitution of the institution of the government.
Najat, do you see a role for Hezbollah in the rebuilding of that state?
Hezbollah has members of the parliaments. Let's come together in the parliament. Let's reinstate the public institutions and all live under the rule of law. Of course, Hezbollah is part of the government and they are part of the Lebanese constitutions and constituents as well, of course.
Jamal, about what Robert was saying earlier, that there might even be divisions within Hezbollah on how to respond to Israel. What do you make of that, and how do you expect it to respond?
I mean, after what happened in the last couple of days, I would expect that there will be a harsher response than anything we've seen before, including after the assassination of its military commanders. We've seen them practice a lot of restraint, even in the type of weaponry that they've used. They have held back a lot of their capabilities, trying not to push things to escalate to an all-out war. But from after what we've seen in the last couple of days, I would expect that this red line that they put for themselves might be crossed, and we might be seeing the introduction of a new weaponry and new ways of attacking the Israeli military, and in order to hurt them more and in order to deter them more, to stop such genocidal action that they are capable of doing and that we've seen capable of doing.
All right, we don't have very long left in the program, and Robert, I'd like to ask you the last question. Time and time again over the last year, we have asked of the tensions between Israel and Hezbollah, how much closer they've brought us to an all-out regional war. How would you characterize the moment that we are in now in the context of the past year?
Jamal is right, and as a result, we're closer than ever because there is significant internal pressure on Hezbollah now to escalate things. If there was a constraining effect from Lebanese society beyond Hezbollah, Hezbollah will now be feeling a pinch to retaliate more strongly. From the Israeli side as well, Israel feels increasingly like it has done all it can do in Gaza. Whether you agree with the war or not, there's this feeling that Israel has basically completed its operational objectives. It's thrown the kitchen sink at Hamas there, and now it can move its military units to the north for a projected or feared confrontation with Hezbollah. So both sides are gearing up for war. I know we've said this on this program several times before, but we are closer than ever to an all-out conflict. Neither side wants it, but that's never stopped wars in the past from escalating into total war, despite the best intentions on both sides.
All right, and that is our show for today. Thank you to all of our guests, Najat Aoun Saliba in Beirut, Robert Geist Pinfold in Durham, and Jamal Ghosn also in Beirut. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, do go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Elizabeth Puranam, and the entire team here, bye for now.